Volgograd woke up in darkness after an attack by Ukrainian drones. Saratov is on fire, a strike hit the oil refinery. In Crimea, a Triumph missile launcher and an ammunition depot were destroyed. Near Konstantinovka, Russian drones attacked a vehicle carrying volunteers and a Western journalist. A fight club in Krasnodar. Teenagers are injuring each other, and 16-year-old Liza is the organizer of these brutal fights. On Komsomolskaya Pravda radio, they admitted that the occupied territories are dead weight. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has requested that former US President Donald Trump grant Hungary a one-year exemption from the anti-Russian sanctions that have been imposed by Western nations. At the same time, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has issued a warning to Russian President Vladimir Putin, highlighting NATO's significant nuclear capabilities as a deterrent. Meanwhile, European countries are working together to prepare a new and coordinated information campaign aiming to strengthen their position and resilience on the information front against Russia. 45 missiles, 458 drones. On the night of November 8th, Russians launched a massive attack on Ukraine. Unfortunately, 26 missiles and 52 drones reached their targets. There are dead and wounded in Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia, including children. The city of Horishny Plavny in the Poltava region was left completely without power after the Russian attack. Strikes were also recorded in the Odessa and Kharkiv regions, as well as in the capital. In addition, Russia attacked railway infrastructure. Some trains were delayed by 5 to 6 hours.
We see that the ratio of ballistic missiles has increased this year compared to cruise missiles. Thus, the enemy is relying on ballistic missiles to hit more targets. In addition, of course, they are also attacking with cruise missiles, both sea and land-based. There is also a large number of attack UAVs.
But the night was also restless for Russia itself. Ukrainian drones visited Russia's fuel and energy facilities in Saratov and the Volgograd region. Fires were also reported in 10 other regions of Russia. At the airports in these regions, the carpet plan was traditionally announced. Karma is catching up with Russians even on their own territory. In Russia, a Ka-226 helicopter carrying workers from a military factory crashed. As a result, 5 people died. When it crashed, the helicopter hit a residential building, which fortunately was empty at the time. However, the authorities in Dagestan are making some very interesting statements. They claim that it was supposedly a tourist helicopter with civilians on board that crashed. Meanwhile, Rosaviatsia clarifies that the helicopter belongs to the Izlyarsky plant and there were no tourists on board. Come on, folks, couldn't you at least coordinate your stories before publishing them? And now, let's talk about the situation at the front. Near Konstantinovka, a Russian drone attacked a vehicle carrying volunteers and journalists. Among the passengers was Austrian correspondent for ORF channel, Christian Verschutz. According to him, everyone managed to get out in time after spotting the drone in advance, and fortunately there were no casualties. However, the vehicle was completely destroyed. Russian forces have reduced their activity and the number of movements in Pokrovsk. This was reported by the 7th Corps of the Ukrainian Air Force.
The enemy wants to minimize losses and is waiting for reinforcements from its main forces. In particular, this is confirmed by attempts of the Russian armed forces to establish logistics through the southern outskirts of the city. In this area, Russian troops have tried several times to transfer personnel using vehicles and motorcycles.
President Zelensky also spoke about the enemy's motivation in Pokrovsk.
I think Russia... Selective, please. I think that with this story about Pokrovsk, Russia, you know what I think it will do? It is very wary of strong decisions being made by the United States. If it doesn't achieve success on the battlefield, it will do everything possible to actually capture Pokrovsk and show some kind of victory on the battlefield.
Lieutenant General Andriy Hanatov also spoke about the situation there.
The enemy is not giving up its attempts to capture Pokrovsk and create conditions to encircle the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration. These intentions have indeed been ongoing for more than a year now.
In addition, the occupiers are trying to infiltrate Ryshin. To do this, Putin's troops disguise themselves as civilians. The situation is also difficult in the Mirnohrad area.
According to our information, after numerous unsuccessful attempts by the enemy to storm the city from the east, the enemy will try to change the direction of their attack.
But despite all this, our forces are not only holding on but also striking back at the enemy. A Ukrainian drone flies into a crowd of Russian soldiers who were already happily taking photos on one of the streets of Pokrovsk.
Filming video is prohibited here. Turn off the camera. Turn off the camera.
And for more details about the situation at the front, watch our military review.
The Ukrainian flag is once again in the center of Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian armed forces have cut off the Russian salient to the north of the city, and the fighting is already taking place on the bottom of the Kakhovka reservoir. The latest news and what's happening on the front today, watch right now. Pokrovsk is currently the main hotspot of the Russian-Ukrainian war. The main objective of the enemy is to gain as strong a foothold in the city as possible, according to the Ukrainian armed forces. To achieve this, the enemy is increasingly using civilian clothing. In particular, that's how they managed to raise the Russian tricolor over the Pokrovsk city council. A few hours later, the defense forces restored the Ukrainian flag to its place, destroying an observation post inside the building and clearing out the enemy in the process. At the same time, fighting continues in other districts of the city.
Ukrainian defense special units have eliminated more than 100 Russian occupiers. This number only includes irrecoverable losses, not counting so-called sanitary losses. At the moment, the main efforts of the special units, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and the Special Operations Forces are focused on unblocking the logistics of Ukraine's defense forces and expanding the area of presence to prevent the possible operational encirclement of our units.
At the same time, during the attacks on Pokrovsk, the Russians tried to take advantage of the weather, according to fighters on the ground. And the first attempts to drive through the city using vehicles have already been recorded.
Meanwhile, our drone operator from the Hostry-Kartusi unit is noting an unpleasant trend. The Russians, at the very least, are trying to enter Pokrovsk using vehicles. Unfortunately, the bad weather is currently playing into the hands of the occupiers, writes Hostry-Kartusi. Previously, we saw Russian troops infiltrating Pokrovsk exclusively on foot. At most, there were occasional attempts to break through on motorcycles. But today, due to the fog, we have already spotted the first Russian military pickup truck in the city. They leisurely cleared away the barricades and drove through the streets of Pokrovsk.
However, they were later destroyed, analysts add. At the same time, the main clashes are already taking place on the distant outskirts of Pokrovsk. Within the city itself, both Ukrainian and Russian positions remain. Both sides are making a particular effort not to draw attention to themselves, so as not to attract a barrage of drones.
The main fighting between Ukrainian and Russian units is taking place specifically on the northern outskirts. The Ukrainian forces that remain deeper in the city are not drawing attention for now. They are likely waiting for reinforcements to strengthen their counterattacks. As a result, the Russian infiltration has gradually deprived Ukraine of control over most of Pokrovsk, creating a gray zone. But Russian soldiers are also unable to take control of it as they lack sufficient forces. And the threat from drones is too great as well.
However, this situational success of the occupiers is primarily due to enormous losses. As our drone operators report, assault groups usually consist of 3 people on average, with the clear expectation that 2 of them will almost certainly be killed. And if anyone survives, it will only be 1 person.
In some areas near Pokrovsk and in Pokrovsk itself, Russian losses reach a ratio of 1 to 18. In favor of the Ukrainians, in other words, for every wounded or killed Ukrainian soldier, there are up to 18 killed or wounded Russian servicemen.
The Russian units are also aware of these statistics, which is why every time reinforcements are brought in for the occupiers, it looks something like this.
Singing songs in a foreign language while trying to sing.
Meanwhile, analysts are noting the successes of the defense forces to the north of Pokrovsk. There, the Russian Federation does not stop trying to get behind our group's lines. However, time and again, they fail.
These are the tactical successes of Ukraine's defense forces in the area of Shakove and Rodinske. These 2 settlements are key for ensuring logistics for Ukraine's defense forces at this moment. And our defenders have managed to significantly improve their positions in these directions. In addition, there has been significant progress in the area of Shakov. This effectively allows us to cut off the so-called incursion of Russian troops into the defense lines of Ukraine's forces.
Putin's troops are also failing to achieve their objectives in Kupiansk. The city, which according to Gerasimov has supposedly been surrounded for 2 weeks, is putting up such resistance that the Russians haven't advanced a single meter there during this time.
Naturally, there is no question of Kupiansk being surrounded, just as there isn't with Pokrovsk, because the Russians' plan was originally to encircle from the north and attempt to break through the river from the south, aiming to cut off a large group of Ukrainian troops and eliminate them, essentially to create a breach in our defensive lines. They wanted this, but ultimately they failed. That's why the assaults and infiltration attempts from the north into the city continue, but Ukraine's defense forces are acting actively and decisively both in Kupiansk itself and to its north.
Meanwhile, an unexpected direction of fighting is unfolding in the Zaporizhia sector, right on the bed of the Kakhovka reservoir.
Yes, it has already dried up enough for soldiers to be able to pass through there. As a result, Ukrainian special forces made their way to the Bolshay-Kuchugry Islands, where a Russian position was already located. The Ukrainians claimed victory, occupied the islands and now part of the mainland, and raised their flag. By the way, this is what Bolshay-Kuchugry used to look like. For a long time after the dam was breached, the bed of the Kakhovka reservoir remained boggy and soft, but it gradually dried out and became overgrown with grass and shrubs. As we can see, infantry can already move around there. Light vehicles most likely can as well.
And finally, new details have emerged regarding the recent Ukrainian strike on Donetsk. As is known, a warehouse storing Shahed-type drones was hit there the day before. Now it has become known how many of them were there.
The estimated number of Shahed-type UAVs, including Jiran, that were stored in warehouses at Donetsk airport was around 1,150 to 1,200. Whether all of them were destroyed is unknown. According to analysts, this is roughly a month's supply of Shaheds for use at the front, meaning for striking tactical targets on the front line, for which the Shaheds are essentially converted into giant FPV drones.
Let me remind you, most experts agree that the strike was carried out by Ukrainian Flamingo missiles, which in fact successfully penetrated Russian air defenses 3 times in 4 days.
I can't help but admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the Ukrainian armed forces. If you can't do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they're watching us. The resistance movement, together with deep strike special operations units, discovered the locations of 2 key enemy targets: the arsenal of Russia's 18th Brigade near Simferopol and an S-400 Triumph missile launcher near Yevpatoria. On the night of October 6th, SSO drones struck the train, and on the same day, SSO units destroyed a mobile launcher that was covering the airspace of the occupied peninsula and could... However, it was not possible to talk about this operation earlier for operational security reasons. This once again proves that even in the occupied territories, our people are active. Together with the Special Operations Forces, they continue to deliver precise strikes against the enemy, weakening the aggressor. Under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such a sensible audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well, which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, we continue, because the most interesting part is coming up next.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Convicts and psychopaths returning to Russia from the war in Ukraine pose an enormous danger to society, committing horrific crimes en masse against civilians. Even Kremlin propagandists acknowledge this and suggest eliminating them with a sledgehammer. More on what other brilliant ideas Russian propagandists are coming up with in their broadcasts. Details in the following report.
What could be more terrifying for Russians than sending their own son or husband to the front in Ukraine? That's right, if he comes back from there.
In St. Petersburg, a man who returned from the war is terrorizing his apartment building, threatening his neighbors and throwing some kind of imitation grenades from his balcony.
Hardly anyone wants to live on the same street with these so-called heroes of the special military operation, or worse, in the same building. As a rule, these newly minted veterans were already notorious outcasts before the war, and after returning from the front, they've completely gone off the rails. Theft, murdering their own drinking buddies, rape and robbery have become everyday occurrences among Russian special military operation veterans back in civilian life.
There's a saying among our people, you can't really fight against a crowbar except perhaps with another crowbar because nothing else is quite as effective.
And for the Russian ex-cons, drug addicts and psychopaths returning from the war, that other crowbar will be something quite tangible.
How can I put this more delicately?
It's hard to believe, but Russian propagandists are increasingly speaking openly about wiping out their own soldiers. Z-bloggers are convinced that there is no place for special military operation participants in civilian life. The state isn't even considering bringing them back and helping them adapt to peaceful life.
All these people who have been given weapons, who have been through the war, many of them have a very serious criminal past. Something has to be done with these people.
Moreover, it's far from the best of the best who return from the war to civilian life. The new Putin military elite, as it's called, the bunker crowd, is made up almost entirely of pardoned convicts.
I would really like to look into the eyes of the person who made the decision to use prisoners in combat operations, because this is a ticking time bomb.
And it will explode inside Russia itself. Or
maybe they're just idiots? That's possible too.
Currently, we have a significant portion of our contingent made up of individuals who, while they are either serving time in prison or are under official investigation, sign formal contracts with the Ministry of Defense. In doing so, they either avoid punishment by the court or they get released from camps and prisons. And they get the chance, as they say, to atone for their guilt with blood, but in reality, they get the opportunity to be free for a while and possibly, if things go well, to eventually gain their freedom, perhaps even fully pardoned, maybe with awards and so on.
The solution that the Kremlin has found is both ingenious and cruel at the same time. There are rumors that Putin simply gave the order not to let anyone return alive from the front. The Russian authorities want to send the most compliant convicts to Africa. As for the rest, following the good old Wagner PMC tradition, they are to be disposed of.
The first option is to send them somewhere in Africa. The second option is that, in general, they will, well, how should I put it, be dealt with more gently. The story with the sledgehammer?
At the same time, it should be noted that such a proposal, which is increasingly voiced by Kremlin propagandists, seems to have received silent approval from the Russian population. Well,
because this is Russian Nazism. They get a thrill from death. That's the only thing that really excites them.
A full-scale campaign against Russian contract soldiers returning from the special military operation has been launched on federal channels as well. There they continue non-stop. Around the clock, 24/7, they try to persuade people to sign a contract with the Ministry of Defense. But when it comes to the death rate at the front, the Kremlin has told them to keep quiet. For example, Russian propagandists cut out part of a broadcast showing Putin's conversation with an 11-year-old girl who asked the president to bring her uncle back from the war.
So what would you ask if I sat down with him?
Well, right now he's there at the front. He was wounded in the arm. He was in the hospital, but they aren't treating him at all. Now they're sending him out on a mission. I wish he could be transferred to a good hospital in Russia. I hope so.
Russian propaganda has received the green light. The Kremlin's mouthpiece has been tasked with going after their own military.
And to pretend that you aren't being beaten.
It seems Putin has grown bored of playing war games with his old toy soldiers. So the bunker dweller gave the order to get rid of them.
Weakness is unacceptable because it creates temptation, the illusion that some issue with us can be resolved.
The endless video appeals from grief-stricken Russian mothers in despair, trying to find their children who have gone missing at the front, the pleas for help from wounded and abandoned contract soldiers left without medicine or medical care, and the complaints from mobilized troops about the unbearable conditions of service in the Russian army. All of this seems to have seriously gotten on Vladimir Vladimirovich's nerves. But instead of solving the problem, the bunker dweller chose to simply ignore it. And he gave Russian propagandists the order to stop any discussion about the troubles in the Russian army.
It's just not needed, and it's simply absurd.
Putin only needs soldiers on the battlefield. Outside of it, all these people become, for the Kremlin, a threat. Unprincipled and skilled with weapons, they could bring the regime extra problems.
What I want to say is, guys, if I may, just those who work in the swamps meticulously and thoroughly record everything precisely and hide nothing.
There will be an order. Only in the most extreme cases should they be sent home. In the most extreme cases. In other words, the order is that they should be scattered wherever possible, in any available place.
As for those who refuse to be scattered, only erasure awaits them.
And while Russian propaganda is racking its brains over how to deal with its own heroes, it seems a new problem is brewing in Russia. In Krasnodar, teenagers have set up a kind of fight club, and they're breaking bones and smashing each other's faces.
Here you go, parents are right now in front of our house. And honestly, I'm already scared to even go outside, because after what you wrote, well, you know, going out to protect someone or something, it's kind of scary.
Russian media report that residents of several city districts are complaining about a group of about 30 teenagers aged 12 to 16. It's known that the kids gather in the evenings and have fights in places where there are no street cameras.
There are adults walking around everywhere and no one cares at all. They fought.
Now they're hugging each other. Meanwhile, the teenagers record these violent beatings on video and post them online. And today it's known that at least 4 children have been injured. A 14-year-old girl was beaten unconscious, suffered a broken nose, knocked out teeth and bruises all over her body. And a man who tried to reprimand the teenagers was taken away by an ambulance. After the blow, he temporarily lost his memory. According to locals, the leader of the group of teenagers is 16-year-old Elizaveta, who is called the organizer of these fights. Almost all the participants, including Liza herself, practice martial arts. It is also known that the parents of the victims have already filed a report with the police and are preparing to go to the investigative committee. I want you to see me like this, carefree, young, sweet, poor, like a yawn, always singing about love. In short, the investigative committee is all well and good. But personally, I'm waiting for some brilliant ideas from Russian propaganda on how to fight this movement. And dear sirs, don't suggest hitting with a sledgehammer. That's already been done. The bodyguards of the Kremlin maniac Putin are called the most secretive and dangerous bodyguards in the world. Videos about them rack up millions of views. In some, a bodyguard spots a suspicious object with his gaze. In others, he shields Putin from a potential attack, and sometimes he pushes strangers away from his boss. Questions arise. Who are all these people in suits really? What do they do and how are they hired for this job? And most importantly, perhaps these very people, the ones with access to the body, might one day physically eliminate the bunker dweller. All this and more in our upcoming report.
They are always nearby. At summits, funerals, hockey games, and even in the sauna. Putin's bodyguards are not just security, they are an entire parallel universe where the main purpose in life has become preserving the body of the aging dictator. They stand like statues, scanning the crowd, seemingly without blinking. If anyone gets too close, they instantly form a human shield.
The video is going viral on foreign social media, where Putin's bodyguard looks like the Terminator. His gaze seems to have scanned the entire crowd in a second.
There are a huge number of videos about Putin's security online. But who are all these people and why are they trusted more than any minister? In the 90s, St. Petersburg's vice mayor Putin didn't have state security, so a private bodyguard, Roman Seprov, a former celebrity bodyguard, was by his side.
Here within the walls of the Kremlin, the history of our country has been made for centuries.
Here he is, Roman Seprov, in the center of the frame, standing right next to Ksenia Sobchak and Alexander Rosenbaum during Putin's inauguration.
Seprov became not just a bodyguard, but a go-between for the future president and the criminal world. Through him passed both casino contracts and flows of illicit cash. So let's just say the beginnings of Putin's security service were rather creative.
The head of the security agency repeatedly carried out all sorts of delicate assignments. For example, it is believed that it was Seprov who acted as the intermediary between Putin and the St. Petersburg crime bosses.
When Putin became president, the myth of an eternal threat became part of the cult. Officially, there were allegedly 5 assassination attempts on him. Snipers, Arabs, Chechen militants, a lineup of enemies to suit the mood. And the more threats there are, the more security he gets.
5 assassination attempts, as I was told. Not as many as Castro had. There were 50 attempts on him. According to official data, there were 5 on U.S.
Since then, Putin's security has become not just a service, but almost a whole religion. To get into the inner circle, you need to be not just healthy and loyal. You need a perfect passport, no beard, no tattoos, and no doubts.
All of Putin's bodyguards have service experience. This could be the FSO or FSB Academy, and before that, military schools. Candidates go through several interviews, talk to a psychologist, and of course, take a polygraph. How else can you find out if the person guarding Vladimir Vladimirovich is a patriot or not?
The average age of Putin's bodyguard is 36, with a salary of 80 to 100,000 rubles. Yes, they protect the nation's treasure, but earn less than a Moscow sales manager. Still, they get honor, stability, and trips to Gelendzhik on assignment. Alexei Dumin, the main star of the Kremlin's security, is said to have saved Putin from drowning and even from a bear. Over the years of service, Dumin rose from bodyguard to governor of Tula and then became a presidential aide. Essentially, Putin's security detail is a career elevator only going up through loyalty.
It was a very remote site in the mountains. And at night, I was on duty in the house. The president was already resting. And then over the radio, I was told, a bear is approaching your entrance. Naturally, I was armed, and the president was upstairs. So the bear and I looked each other in the eye. He backed off a little. I opened the door and emptied the entire magazine of my pistol at his feet.
Even Putin's cooks, who are FSO officers, not only grill meat but also practice shooting at the range. Every ingredient is checked as if it were a nuclear launch button. Before Putin himself tastes a dish, it is first sampled by a bodyguard.
All my cooks are employees of the Federal Protective Service. They are military personnel holding various ranks. I don't have any other cooks.
Today, Putin travels in an armored train equipped with a hammam, a gym, and secure communications. And everywhere he goes, a special suitcase follows him. Inside, there is neither paper nor a laptop. Inside are the president's biomaterials. Putin's security feeds him, protects him, and idolizes him. Because in a system where one person's safety is the top priority, it becomes more important than the safety of the entire country.
Moldova has set a strict deadline for the sale of the recently sanctioned Russian Lukoil's assets in the country. It is known that the Moldovan government is ready to buy out part of the assets of the Russian oil company Lukoil, which has come under US sanctions within the territory of the republic. Moldova's Minister of Energy, Dorin Junghetu, stated that Lukoil owns a network of gas stations in Moldova, as well as the only storage facility for supplying and refueling aircraft at Chisinau Airport. But due to Russian sanctions starting from November 21st, Lukoil will not be able to operate in Moldova. Consequently, Moldova has announced that it is ready to purchase part of Lukoil's assets and has set a deadline of November 17th for the Russian company to accept the offer.
To this end, the Council for the Review of Investments of Importance to State Security decided to reject Lukoil's proposal to dispose of its assets and sell the airport infrastructure to another company, justifying this by stating that the company cannot be accepted by the Republic of Moldova due to national security concerns. The Council put forward a proposal to purchase Lukoil's warehouse at the airport so that the state could take over the management of the company's infrastructure and resources.
Junghetu also stated that Moldova supports the American sanctions, but at the same time, the country requested a temporary permit from the United States for the operation of the Russian company Lukoil, which is under sanctions, in order to resolve the issue without disrupting the supply of oil resources to the republic. Moldova is already in negotiations with Bulgaria and Romania, including the company Rompetrol, regarding the supply of gasoline, diesel fuel, and kerosene. After the meeting between Trump and Orban, the United States agreed not to block, for now, the supply of Russian oil and gas to Hungary. However, prior to the meeting with Orban, Trump had stated that his administration was considering the issue of Budapest purchasing Russian oil and the potential for secondary sanctions because of it.
We are considering this issue because it is very difficult for Orban to obtain oil and gas from other sources. As you know, they don't have the advantage of access to the sea.
Later, a BBC source in the White House reported that Hungary has been exempted from sanctions for a limited period of 1 year. We
have received a full exemption from sanctions for the Druzhba and Turkstream oil pipelines. We agreed, the president made the decision and said that sanctions would not be applied to these two oil pipelines.
In addition, on the eve of the Trump-Orban meeting in Washington, Zelensky stated that Kiev would eventually ensure that Europe stops buying Russian oil.
We will still find a way to make sure there is no Russian oil in Europe. It's very good that the United States of America is interested in this. But as a country under Russian aggression, we are definitely interested in this.
Zelensky also stated that Ukraine will not allow Russian oil to be sold to Hungary.
We will not let the Russians sell oil there. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of our position. There are some things we simply cannot do today, because there are many different dependencies in this puzzle. But we will still put the picture together in this puzzle. Orban, who constantly discusses the issue with various important players to get them to influence us, in my opinion, should have built his election campaign not on hatred towards Ukraine, but on friendship.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned the Russian dictator Putin that the alliance possesses a powerful nuclear deterrent which ensures the preservation of peace. Rutte emphasized that the citizens of NATO countries can remain calm despite Russia's dangerous and ruthless nuclear rhetoric.
When Russia uses dangerous and reckless nuclear rhetoric, our people should know that there is no reason to panic, because NATO has a powerful nuclear deterrent to maintain peace.
At the same time, the European Union is preparing a new front against Russian aggression, an informational one. This was reported by The Guardian. A separate body is being created within the European Commission to counter Russian disinformation and propaganda. According to European officials, Russia's hybrid attacks are also aimed at undermining democratic institutions and stability in Europe. China is outpacing the world in missile production rates. CNN journalists report that the expansion of missile production accelerated after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and is aimed at potentially deterring Washington from assisting Taiwan.
The total area of enterprises associated with the missile forces of the PRC has increased by more than 2 million square meters from 2020 to 2025. It is noted that more than 60% of the 136 missile facilities are currently under construction or being modernized. In particular, the plant producing DF-26 medium and intercontinental range ballistic missiles is being expanded.
In addition, according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China is expanding its nuclear arsenal faster than any other country, increasing it by about 100% each year. New warheads since 2023. What do you think? Is this so-called arms race aimed solely at deterrence, or is the country preparing for a real war? On the Ukrainian territories occupied by Russia, there is devastation and decline, and almost nothing works there. The seized Ukrainian enterprises are either destroyed or their products are of little use to anyone in Russia. In fact, there was a broadcast on Komsomolskaya Pravda radio, where the economic situation of the Ukrainian territories temporarily occupied by Russia was discussed. And the invited expert said, hard as it is to believe, but the truth.
As for the industry in the DPR and LPR, has anything changed significantly?
Unfortunately, nothing has changed. If anything, it seems to have gotten worse. At the level of individual enterprises, there have been no changes. There has been no change in rhetoric either. In other words, things are not good with our enterprises. But if you believe the officials, they keep making promises and keep talking about how someday we will reach that very bright future.
In addition, it was mentioned on air that the occupied territories cannot be integrated into the Russian market. Because of this, the region remains cut off from the rest of the world.
The situation with industry is difficult. At the level of individual enterprises, for example, in Mashprom, the situation also varies there. Many were handed over to investors, taken under their wing, but again, they cannot objectively demonstrate any significant success, simply because it is still not entirely clear how to integrate them into the Russian market. Well, let's take railway equipment, for example. When it comes to rail cars, we have Uralvagonzavod, and for locomotives, we also have major manufacturers. So what can be produced in large volumes in the LNR? That's the real question. That's why, unfortunately, everything is stuck in this state, where there are objective difficulties with integration into the Russian market and a shortage of labor. And when these problems are further aggravated by a shortage of water. Because without water, you can't smelt metal or properly produce food.
In fact, what this expert is saying is quite obvious. This expert is stating something rather obvious. It's quite obvious, so why is it that no one in Russia talks about this publicly? Everyone continues to unanimously support the obvious madness of their leader in a war that brings only losses and damages and makes no sense at all. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better, and we'll definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we're doing, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you soon.